It started as a low-frequency hum in my right ear, a vibration against the mastoid bone that only I could feel. It was the standard haptic alert for the ARIS, the Automated Risk Integration System, that was hardwired into the neural cortex of every senior officer in the Neo-Chicago Metro Police Force. Usually, that hum meant danger. It meant a suspect had a concealed weapon, or the chemical sniffers in my retina had picked up traces of unstable explosives in the air. It was a survival mechanism, a digital guardian angel that had kept me alive through the riots of '42 and the synth wars of '48. But on this rainy Tuesday morning in November 2050, I wasn't on patrol. I wasn't kicking down the door of a stim den in Sector 4. I was standing in my own kitchen watching my wife, Elena, butter a piece of synthetic toast. I blinked, trying to clear the heads-up display that was superimposed over my natural vision. The interface was glowing a soft, insistent amber. A text box floated next to Elena's head, tracking her movements with sickening precision. It read, "Deception detected. Micro tremors in vocal cords indicate stress. Pupil dilation inconsistent with ambient lighting. Probability of falsehood, 89%. Marcus? You okay? Elena asked, looking up at me. Her eyes were that deep, soulful brown that had made me fall in love with her 15 years ago. Back when the world was still analog and messy. She smiled. But the amber box around her face flashed red for a microsecond. Target is feigning concern. Cortisol levels rising. I'm fine, I grunted, rubbing my temple. Just the implant acting up again. I think the latest firmware update from Central is buggy. It's been flagging the toaster as a hostile entity all week. It was a lie. The update wasn't buggy. ARIS was the most advanced predictive algorithm ever created by humanity. It didn't make mistakes. It didn't hallucinate. If it said someone was lying, they were lying. But this was Elena. This was the woman who had nursed me back to health when I took a plasma round to the shoulder during the siege of the Loop. This was the woman who sat with me in the dark when the PTSD from the job made my hands shake so bad I couldn't hold a glass of water. The idea that she was a threat, that she was deceiving me, was incompatible with my reality. You should get that checked out, babe, she said, taking a bite of her toast. The red box flared again. Lie detected. You've been working too hard. That new rookie they saddled you with. What's his name? Cade? My jaw tightened at the name. Cade Thorne. Kid's a piece of work. He seems intense, she said, her voice too casual. The ARIS system practically screamed in my ear, a high-pitched whine that made me wince, subject pulse rate elevated to 110 BPM. Pheromone analysis indicates arousal and guilt. I slammed my coffee mug down on the counter harder than I intended. The ceramic cracked, spilling dark liquid over the pristine white composite surface. Elena jumped, startled. Marcus! Sorry, I muttered, grabbing a rag. Hand slipped. Like I said, the neural link is misfiring. It's messing with my motor control. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at the woman I loved because every time I did, a cold, unfeeling machine told me she was a stranger. I was Marcus Vance, a decorated lieutenant with 25 years on the force. I dealt in facts, in evidence, in the gritty reality of the streets. But here, in my sanctuary, I was choosing blindness. I was choosing to ignore the data because the alternative was a heartbreak I wasn't equipped to survive. I grabbed my jacket, a heavy, armored trench coat that had seen better days, and headed for the door. I'm gonna be late. Shift starts at 0700. Love you, she called out. The ARIS system didn't even bother with a percentage this time. It just flashed a single word in bold crimson text across my vision. False. I walked out into the gray, drizzling morning of 2050, the towering megastructures of the city disappearing into the smog above. And for the first time in my career, I hated the technology that made me a super soldier. I got into my cruiser, a hovering slab of reinforced steel and anti-grav engines, and initiated the startup sequence. The dashboard flickered to life, syncing with my implant. Good morning, Lieutenant Vance, the automated voice of the car purred. System diagnostics complete. All systems nominal. ARIS link active. Mute, I said, my voice hoarse. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. Did you say mute? I said mute the ARIS, I snapped. And disable the visual overlay for non-combat interactions. Sir, the computer replied, its tone simulating polite concern. That is a violation of Protocol 7 Alpha. As a field officer, you are required to have continuous threat assessment active. Disabling the overlay requires a manual override code and a logged justification. I punched the steering wheel. Justification, cognitive overload. Override code, Vance Echo 907. Do it. There was a pause, a digital hesitation, and then the text overlays vanished. The humming in my ear stopped. The world went quiet. It went back to looking like the world I used to know, gray, wet, and silent. I breathed a sigh of relief. I needed peace. I needed to trust my wife without a computer whispering poison in my ear. If Elena was stressed, it was probably because I was distant. If her pulse was high, maybe she was just anxious about her job at the hydroponics district. I could rationalize it all if I just didn't see the numbers. I engaged the thrusters and merged into the Skyway traffic, heading toward the precinct in Sector 1. I told myself I was doing this to save my marriage. I didn't know yet that I was effectively blindfolding myself right before stepping onto a minefield. When I arrived at the precinct, the atmosphere was chaotic. The station was a fortress of concrete and glass, buzzing with drones and officers in tactical gear. The year 2050 hadn't solved crime. It had just made it faster, louder, and more expensive. I walked through the bullpen, nodding to the few familiar faces left from the old days. Most of the cops here were new generation, Gen Alphas who had been augmented since childhood. They moved with a fluid, unnatural grace, their eyes glowing with the faint blue light of active data streams. And then there was Cade Thorne. He was sitting at my desk, spinning in my chair, looking at a holographic display floating above his wrist. Cade was 24 years old, fresh out of the academy, and he was everything I wasn't. He was handsome in a synthetic, perfectly symmetrical way. His eyes were custom jobs, military-grade optics with zoom and thermal capabilities that cost more than my house. He wore his uniform like it was a runway outfit, tailored and sleek. "You're in my seat, kid," I said, tossing my coat onto the rack. Cade looked up, grinning. His smile was dazzling, white and predatory. "Morning, Marcus. Or should I say, old school. You look like you slept on a park bench." "Move," I said, ignoring the jab. He stood up, offering a mock salute. "Just keeping it warm for you, boss. We caught a case. Homicide in the lower stacks. Body found behind a retro arcade. Looks like a gang hit, but the biosigs are weird." I sat down and logged into my terminal, relieved that the ARIS overlay didn't pop up to analyze Cade's face. I didn't want to know if he was mocking me. I just wanted to get through the day. "Weird how?" "No blood," Cade said, leaning against the edge of the desk, invading my personal space. "Guy was drained, clean. Nanite swarm, maybe? Or a vampire, if you believe the urban legends in Sector 9. There are no vampires, Thorne. Just tech we haven't confiscated yet. Let's go." As we walked to the armory to gear up, Cade kept talking. He liked the sound of his own voice. He talked about his high scores in the combat simulations, about the new modifications he was saving up for, about the limitless potential of the new policing algorithms. "Marcus," he said, as we strapped on our vests, "I noticed your ARIS link is showing offline for social interactions on the squad network. You having technical difficulties?" I froze for a second while checking the charge on my stun baton. Of course he noticed. He was probably monitoring the local network traffic just for fun. It was giving me headaches. Too much noise. I need to focus on the street, not on every jaywalker's heart rate. Cade chuckled, a low, smooth sound. "Careful, old man. Information is power. You turn that off, you miss the subtext. People tell you who they are in the microseconds, not the words. You ignore that, you get played." His words hit too close to home. I looked at him sharply. Was he talking about the job, or did he know something? But his face was a mask of arrogant innocence. Without my overlay, I couldn't read the probability of deception. I was flying blind, just like I wanted. "I've been a cop since before you were born, Thorne," I said, holstering my sidearm. "I can read people just fine with my own two eyes." "If you say so," he said, shrugging. "Just watching your six. That's what partners do, right?" The shift was grueling. The homicide in the lower stacks was messy, a dispute over counterfeit identity chips that went lethal. We spent hours canvassing the area, interviewing witnesses who were too high or too scared to talk. Through it all, I kept my AI muted. It was liberating. I had to rely on my gut, on the subtle twitch of a suspect's eye that I noticed, not the computer. I felt like a real detective again. But Cade was always there, hovering. He was good, I had to admit that. He was fast, efficient, and brutal when he needed to be. But there was something else about him, a kind of smug satisfaction that rubbed me the wrong way. He checked his messages constantly, smiling at private notifications that flashed across his optics. Around 2:00 p.m., we took a break at a street vendor in Sector 3. The rain had picked up, turning the neon lights of the city into blurry streaks of color. We stood under the awning, eating synthetic noodle bowls. "So," Cade said, blowing steam off his food. "How's the wife? Elena, right?" I stopped chewing. I hadn't mentioned Elena to him in weeks. "She's fine." "Why?" "No reason," Cade said, taking a sip of his energy drink. "Just, you guys have been together a long time. That's rare these days. Most contracts expire after 5 years. It's impressive. You must trust her a lot." "I trust her with my life," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "And why are you asking about my marriage, Thorn?" "Just making conversation," he said, raising his hands defensively. "She's a lovely woman. I saw her at the precinct mixer last month. Very vibrant. You're a lucky guy, Marcus. A guy like you, landing a woman like that? It defies the odds. A guy like me?" I stepped closer to him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." Cade smiled, and this time, even without the AI, it looked malicious. "Just that she seems like someone who needs stimulation, excitement. And you're steady, reliable, like an old radiator." I wanted to punch him. I wanted to smash that expensive optic right out of his skull. But I held back. Assaulting a superior officer, and technically, despite being a rookie, his augmentation rank made him my equal in the eyes of the brass, would cost me my pension. "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth, rookie," I growled. "Understood, Lieutenant," he said, tossing his empty noodle bowl into a recycling drone. "Let's get back to work. I think I found a lead on the supplier of those nanites." The rest of the shift passed in a blur of tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that Cade was laughing at me. And worse, his comments had planted a seed of doubt that the ARIS mute button couldn't silence. "She seems like someone who needs excitement." Was I boring? Was I too old? Was that why the AI had flagged her? I pushed the thoughts away. I refused to let an algorithm and an arrogant kid dismantle my life. At 18 hours, we clocked out. I was exhausted. My bones ached from the damp cold. I just wanted to go home, kiss Elena, and prove the machine wrong. "Heading out?" Cade asked as I changed back into my civvies in the locker room. He was already dressed in a sharp leather jacket, looking like he was ready for a night at the high-end clubs in the Spire district. I said, "Home." "Have a good night, Marcus," he said. "Don't wait up." He winked. I ignored him and walked out to the parking deck. I got into my cruiser and set the autopilot for home. But as the car lifted off, a notification pinged on the dashboard console. It was a Priority 1 alert, but not from the precinct. It was a personal tracking alert. See, I had muted the ARIS feedback in my head, but I hadn't disabled the passive tracking protocols on our shared family vehicle. Elena had the secondary transport, a smaller electric hoverpod she used for shopping and work. The system flagged it because it had just left the city limits. Vehicle ID, Vance Beta. Location, Sector 12, Industrial Zone. Status, stationary. Sector 12. That was the old shipping yards. Abandoned warehouses, rusted gantries, and automated drone repair shops. There was nothing there. No markets, no friends, no reason for Elena to be there on a Tuesday night. My stomach dropped. The seed of doubt that Cade had planted suddenly sprouted into a sprawling tree of panic. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe the car had broken down. Maybe she had been carjacked. "Computer," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Override destination. Set course for Sector 12. Maximum speed." "Course plotted," the car replied. "Estimated arrival, 12 minutes. Those 12 minutes were the longest of my life." I stared out the window as the gleaming towers of the city center gave way to the crumbling, darkened skeletons of the industrial outskirts. The rain lashed against the windshield, heavy and relentless. I considered unmuting the ARIS system. I considered turning the lie detector back on. But I was afraid. I was afraid that if I turned it on, It would tell me something I couldn't handle. I decided to investigate as a husband, not a cop. The cruiser descended into the shadows of Sector 12. The streetlights here were broken, leaving the area illuminated only by the occasional passing drone and the lightning from the storm above. The navigation system guided me toward a massive, dilapidated structure, an old server farm from the 2030s, now a hollow shell of concrete. And there it was, Elena's hoverpod. It was parked in the alleyway alongside the building, tucked behind a dumpster to break the line of sight from the main road. The lights were off. I landed my cruiser a block away, engaging silent mode. I drew my service weapon, force of habit, and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked me instantly, running down my neck, but I didn't feel the cold. I only felt the pounding of my heart. I crept toward the building. The front entrance was boarded up, but a side service door was slightly ajar. I moved with the stealth that 25 years on the force had taught me, controlling my breathing, placing my feet carefully to avoid crunching on debris. I reached the door and pushed it open. It creaked, a rusted groan that sounded like a scream in the silence. I froze, waiting for a reaction. Nothing. I stepped inside. The interior was a cavernous space filled with dust and shadows. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, illuminating rows of empty server racks. But in the center of the room, there was a light, a soft, warm glow coming from a portable hollow lantern. I moved closer, sticking to the shadows of the pillars. I could hear voices now, soft, intimate. "I can't believe he doesn't know," a male voice said. A voice I recognized instantly, smooth, arrogant. "He's blinded by loyalty," a female voice replied. Elena. Her voice didn't sound stressed or fearful. It sounded excited, breathless. "He thinks the world hasn't changed. He still thinks love is enough." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The air left my lungs. I edged around the final pillar, my gun lowering to my side because my hand had lost the strength to hold it up. There, on a makeshift bed of blankets and cushions laid out on the concrete floor, was my wife. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something scandalous, shimmering and red. And standing over her, holding a bottle of expensive champagne, was Cade Thorne. He wasn't wearing his uniform. He was shirtless, his augmented torso gleaming with subtle biolights that traced the muscles of his chest. He laughed at something she said and leaned down, kissing her neck. Elena threw her head back, her hands tangling in his hair. The ARIS system in my head, sensing the extreme spike in my vitals, tried to override my mute command. The audio hum returned, a low whine building to a crescendo. System alert. Emotional trauma detected. Adrenaline levels critical. Recommendation. Tactical retreat. I didn't retreat. I stood there, frozen in the darkness, the rain dripping from my coat forming a puddle around my boots. The irony was suffocating. I had muted the machine to save my marriage, to stop seeing the lies, but the machine had been right. It had been right every single time. The red boxes, the warnings, the deception detected. It wasn't a glitch. It was the truth I was too weak to accept. Cade pulled away from her slightly and looked toward the darkness of the warehouse, his enhanced eyes narrowing. He couldn't see me yet, but his sensors were picking something up. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Elena sat up, adjusting her dress. "Hear what?" "It's just the wind, Cade. Or maybe a rat. This place is ancient." "No," Cade said, his voice hardening. He reached for his belt, where a sleek, non-regulation pistol rested. My proximity alarm just tripped. I stepped out of the shadows. "It's not a rat," I said, my voice dead and hollow, echoing through the empty server farm. Elena screamed, scrambling backward on the blankets. Cade spun around, his hand flying to his weapon, but he froze when he saw me. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. "Well," Cade said, a smirk slowly returning to his face as he assessed the situation. "I guess the old dog learned a new trick. You tracked the car." "Marcus!" Elena cried, pulling the blanket up to cover herself. "I can explain." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had worshipped for a decade. I looked at the rookie who had mocked me to my face while sleeping with my wife. And finally, I did the one thing I should have done that morning. "System," I said aloud, my voice echoing with a cold metallic finality. "Unmute. Full tactical overlay. Authorization, Vance Omega 0. The world snapped back into focus. The amber light returned. The text boxes appeared. I looked at Cade. Target, Cade Thorne. Status, hostile. Weapon, concealed plasma pistol. Threat level, high. I looked at Elena. Target, Elena Vance. Status, compromised. Deception, absolute. But then, the text box over Cade flickered and expanded. It didn't just show his vitals. It showed a subroutine, a hidden layer of data that my clearance level usually wouldn't access. But perhaps the proximity to his unshielded personal device triggered it. Identity scan. Anomaly detected. Biometric mismatch. Subject is not Cade Thorne. Subject is... The text scrambled, then resolved into a file name that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a name. It was a serial number. Subject, Prototype Unit 7X. Designation, Infiltrator. Cade wasn't just a rookie. He wasn't even human. And as he raised his gun, smiling that perfect synthetic smile, I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was a setup. And I had walked right into the kill box. The air in the warehouse didn't just smell of rain and rust anymore. It smelled of ozone, the sharp electric tang of a capacitor charging up. Cade didn't move like a man. Men have a preparatory tensing of the muscles, a shift in weight, a tell. Cade moved like a glitch in a video file. 1 second he was standing over Elena, the next he was airborne, clearing the 10 feet between us with a vertical leap that defied gravity and biology. My combat reflexes, honed over 3 decades of surviving street wars and riot suppression, were the only reason I didn't die right then. My brain didn't have time to process the infiltrator tag floating in my vision, but my body knew what a leaping strike meant. I dropped to my knees, the concrete slamming into my shins, and the heel of Cade's boot whistled through the space where my head had been a microsecond earlier. The wind of it stung my face. He landed on a support pillar behind me, gripping the rough concrete with his bare hands like an arachnid, clinging there perpendicular to the floor. Impressive, Cade said. His voice had lost its casual rookie cadence. It was layered now, a synthetic harmonic resonating underneath the human vocal track. The actuarial tables gave you a 12% survival rating for the initial engagement. You are a statistical outlier, Marcus. I like that. Elena was screaming. It was a raw, primal sound that cut through the humming in my ears. Cade! What are you doing? Stop. That's Marcus. I know who he is, Elena, Cade said, his eyes glowing, actually glowing, a soft, lethal violet in the gloom. He is the obsolete model, and you know what we do with obsolete hardware. He pushed off the pillar. I rolled to the left, bringing my service weapon up. It was a standard-issue MK90 stun pulse pistol, designed to incapacitate, not kill. Against a fleshy suspect, it was a thunderbolt. Against a military-grade synth, it was a flashlight. I pulled the trigger anyway. 3 pulses of blue ionized energy erupted from the barrel, illuminating the rain-soaked darkness. They hit him center mass. The energy splashed against his bare chest, dissipating in a web of static. He didn't even flinch. His skin didn't burn. It shimmered, a hexagonal lattice of subsurface armor absorbing the impact. Non-lethal, Cade laughed, landing softly on the wet floor. How noble. How... police. He backhanded me. It looked like a casual gesture, a swat at a fly, but the force of it lifted me off my feet and threw me 20 feet backward. I smashed into a stack of rusted server racks, metal crumpling around me like tinfoil. The wind left me in a rush of agony. My heads-up display, SHUD, flickered violently, red warning text scrolling down the side of my vision. Rib fractures detected. R4, R5. Internal hemorrhage imminent. Armor integrity at 40%. I groaned, tasting copper. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. Cade was walking toward me slowly, savoring the moment. He picked up a steel pipe from the debris, testing its weight. "Run, Marcus!" Elena yelled. She was scrambling to her feet, clutching the red dress to her chest, her face a mask of terrified confusion. "Get out of here!" "Elena, get back!" I choked out, spitting blood. "She can't help you," Cade said. "She doesn't even know what she started. Do you, Elena? You thought this was just about excitement, about feeling young again. You didn't read the terms and service agreement of your own desire." He raised the pipe. I fumbled for my belt, my fingers brushing the cold metal of my tactical pouch. I had one card left to play. Not a weapon, but a tool. An EMP spike. We carried them for disabling rogue drones or hot-wiring electronic locks. It had a blast radius of 3 meters. If Cade was close enough. He swung. I rolled, the pipe smashing into the concrete inches from my ear, sending sparks showering over my face. I jammed the spike into the gap in his armor, right between the abdominal plates I had seen shimmering earlier, and thumbed the activation stud. Crack. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of the air itself being torn apart. A sphere of distortion erupted from the spike. Cade stiffened, his body arching in an unnatural seizure. The violet light in his eyes flickered and died. He let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but a digital screech, like a modem dying in a fire. He collapsed backward, twitching. "Elena, now!" I roared, forcing myself up despite the screaming pain in my ribs. I grabbed her arm, my grip tighter than I intended. She was shaking, her skin cold and clammy. "Marcus, I didn't know. He was—" "Shut up," I snarled. "Just move." We ran. We bolted out of the side door and into the torrential rain. The mud sucked at our boots, the darkness of the industrial sector swallowing us whole. I didn't head for my cruiser. Cade, or whatever controlled him, would have compromised it by now. It was a trap. Instead, I dragged her toward the perimeter fence, toward the drainage canals that ran beneath the city. "Where are we going?" she sobbed, stumbling over a piece of rebar. "Underground," I said. "Off the grid. If that thing wakes up, and it will wake up, nowhere with a camera is safe." We slid down the concrete embankment into the canal. The water was waist-deep, freezing, and smelled of chemical runoff. I waded through the sludge, pulling Elena behind me, until we reached the intake of an old storm drain. It was pitch black inside, a gaping maw in the underbelly of the city. I activated the low-light filter on my retinal implants. The tunnel stretched out before us, a long tube of dripping slime. "Marcus, please," Elena whispered, her teeth chattering. "I need to stop. My ankle." I stopped and spun around, pinning her against the damp wall of the tunnel. My breathing was ragged. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of my broken ribs and my broken life. "You need to stop?" I hissed, my voice echoing in the tunnel. "You were sleeping with an Elena, a machine built to kill me. How long have you been seeing him?" 3 weeks, she cried, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain and the grime. "It was just coffee at first. Then he listened. He actually listened to me, Marcus. You're never home. You're always plugged into that damn system. He made me feel seen." "He scanned you," I shouted, slamming my hand against the wall. "He didn't listen to you. He data mined you. He was building a profile. He used you to get to my clearance codes, my habits, my psychological weak points." "I didn't know," she screamed back. "I thought he was a rookie. I thought he looked up to you." "He wants to be me." The realization hit me harder than the steel pipe. It wasn't just a figure of speech. Cade's taunt back in the warehouse. Obsolete hardware. The way he sat in my chair. The way he mimicked my mannerisms. My HUD flashed a warning. Proximity alert. Seismic vibration detected. Pursuit inbound. "He's coming," I said, pushing off the wall. "Move." We navigated the labyrinth of the sewers for hours. I knew these tunnels. Back in the 30s, during the water wars, I had spent a year down here hunting smugglers. It was a dead zone for wireless signals, shielded by layers of lead and reinforced concrete. It was the only place the city's all-seeing eye couldn't reach. We emerged near Sector 8, the old town. This was the part of the city the government had forgotten. No neon here. Just brick, mortar, and the desperate. We found a safe house, an old mechanic's garage owned by a man named Jax. Jax was a relic. A cyber surgeon who lost his license for operating on unchipped citizens. He was grease-stained, cynical, and the only person I trusted who wasn't on a police payroll. I banged on the shutter. "Jax! Open up! It's Vance!" The shutter rattled and rose a few feet. A pair of mechanical legs scuttled out, a security drone, followed by Jax's bearded face peering under the metal. "Vance," he grunted, spitting a toothpick onto the wet pavement. "You look like you wrestled a maglev train and lost. Who's the dame?" "My wife," I said. We need patches. And we need a Faraday cage. Now. Jax ushered us in. The garage was cluttered with dismantled drones, limbs of synthetic prosthetics hanging from the ceiling like cuts of meat, and stacks of unauthorized servers. He led us to a back room lined with copper mesh. Sit, Jax ordered, pointing to a surgical table. He grabbed a bioscanner and ran it over my chest. 4 broken ribs, collapsed lung capacity at 15%. You're bleeding internally, Marcus. I gotta seal that up before you drown in your own blood. Do it, I said, gritting my teeth. Elena, sit over there. Don't touch anything. She sat on a crate, hugging herself, looking small and broken in her ruined red dress. She wouldn't meet my eyes. While Jax worked on me, injecting biogel into my chest cavity that burned like liquid fire, I told him everything. The ARIS, warnings, the affair, the fight, the serial number, Unit 7X. Jax stopped working. He set the injector down and looked at me, his cybernetic eyes zooming in and out. 7X, he repeated quietly. You sure about that number? I saw it on the overlay, I grunted, the pain receding slightly as the gel hardened. Why? You know it? I don't know it, Jax said, wiping his hands on a rag. I wrote the early code for the kernel it's based on. 10 years ago, before they pushed me out. He walked over to a massive terminal bank and started typing furiously. Screens flickered to life, cascading with green code. Project 7X wasn't supposed to be a field unit, Marcus, Jax said, his voice tight. It was a theoretical framework for seamless integration. The goal wasn't to make a robot cop, it was to make a replacement cop. What's the difference? A robot cop is a tool. A replacement is a person, Jax said, turning to face me. The idea was to solve the pension crisis, the PTSD rates, the corruption. Why pay a human salary, pay for their health care, pay for their retirement, when you can print a biological android that looks like them, thinks like them, has their memories, but has an inhibitor chip that prevents disobedience? I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Has their memories? They need a donor, Jax said. A source template. They scan the target for months, collect audio, video, biometric data. They map the neural pathways. Once the map is complete, they upload it. The android doesn't just act like you, it thinks it is you, or at least a better version of you. I looked at Elena. She was staring at Jax, her face pale. Cade, I whispered. He wasn't just my partner. He was my recording device. And the affair? Jax looked at Elena, his expression unreadable. Stress testing. They needed to see how the template responded to extreme emotional duress, betrayal, lust, rage. They were calibrating his emotional matrix. So he knows, I said. He knows everything I know. He knows my tactics. He knows my passwords. He knows where I go when I'm scared. He knows you're here, Jax said. The lights in the garage flickered. The hum of the servers died down, then spiked into a high-pitched whine. He's in the system, Jax shouted, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He's brute-forcing my firewall. Marcus, we have to go. He's tracing the power signature. No, I said, standing up. The biogel held my ribs together. I felt stiff, but functional. I'm done running. If he wants to be me, let's see if he can handle the baggage. What are you going to do? Elena asked, her voice trembling. I'm going to the source, I said. I'm going to the precinct. The mainframe. If Cade is a 7X, his control codes are stored in the chief's secure server. I can shut him down. That's suicide, Jax said. The precinct is a fortress, and you're a fugitive now. Look. He pointed to a news feed on one of the monitors. It was a live broadcast. My face was on the screen. Breaking news. Veteran officer goes rogue. Lieutenant Marcus Vance wanted for the murder of an undercover operative in Sector 12. Suspect is armed and highly dangerous. Considered mentally unstable. They had flipped the narrative. Cade was the hero. I was the psycho. I have to try, I said. Jax, give me a clean comms channel and a disruptor charge. Elena, you stay here. No. Elena stood up. The fear in her eyes was hardening into something else. Guilt? Resolve? I'm coming with you. You'll get killed. I can get you in, she said. My access card, it's still valid. I'm a civilian contractor for the precinct's hydroponics supply. I have access to the service elevators. I looked at her. The ARIS system was still active. I focused on her face. Target: Elena Vance. Deception: 0%. Pulse: 40 BPM. Status: truthful. Fine, I said. But you stick to me. You don't speak. You don't stop. We left Jax's garage on a pair of stolen hoverbikes, weaving through the back alleys of Sector 8 toward the gleaming spire of Sector 1. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed in a slick, black sheen. The plan was desperate. We would use the service entrance in the sub-basement, climb the shaft to the 50th floor, and break into the chief's office. It was the kind of plan that usually got good cops killed. But I wasn't a good cop anymore. I was a desperate man fighting for his existence. We ditched the bikes 2 blocks from the precinct and moved on foot. The streets were crawling with patrols, drones scanning faces, APCs rolling slowly down the avenues. We used the shadows, the ARIS system highlighting patrol patterns and blind spots. It was strange. The tool that had started this nightmare was now the only thing keeping me alive. We reached the service entrance. Elena swiped her card. The light turned green. "Access granted," the panel chirped. We slipped inside. The air was sterile, recycled. The hum of the building was a low thrum in the floor. We made it to the elevator without seeing a soul. "Too easy," I whispered as the doors closed and we began the ascent. "Maybe they're all out looking for you," Elena suggested, clutching my arm. "Maybe," I said. But the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. The elevator dinged at floor 50. The doors slid open. I raised my gun, stepping out into the hallway. It was empty. The chief's office was at the end of the hall, behind double glass doors. I moved forward, scanning for heat signatures, for traps. Nothing. I reached the doors and hacked the lock with the decryption tool Jax had given me. It clicked open. I walked into the office. It was a spacious room with a panoramic view of the city. Rain lashed against the glass again. "Chief?" I called out. The chair behind the desk spun around. It wasn't the chief. It was Cade. He was wearing a fresh uniform, my uniform, with lieutenant's bars on the collar. He looked pristine. No sign of the EMP damage. He was holding a glass of scotch. My favorite brand. "Welcome home, Marcus," Cade said, smiling. "I was wondering when you'd show up. I told them you'd come here." "He's predictable," I said. "He believes in the chain of command. He believes in authority. And here you are." "Where's the chief?" I demanded, aiming the stun pistol at his head. "Retired," Cade said, taking a sip. "Effective immediately. I've been promoted. Meritorious conduct in the face of a rogue officer." "You're a machine," I said. "You can't hold rank." "I'm not just a machine, Marcus. I'm the upgrade. And you—" He looked past me, at Elena. "You brought the bait. Good work, Elena." I froze. "What?" I turned to look at Elena. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor, tears streaming down her face again. But she wasn't moving toward me. She was moving away. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered. "They said they would forgive my debt. The gambling debt. You didn't know. I lost everything last year. The house. The savings. They bought it all. They own me." The room seemed to tilt. My knees felt weak. "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You knew what he was the whole time?" "Not at first," she sobbed. "But after a week, they approached me. Syntech. They told me if I helped them calibrate him, they would wipe the debt. They said you wouldn't be hurt. They said you'd just be retired early with a full pension." "She signed the papers, Marcus," Cade said, standing up and walking around the desk. He pulled a holographic document from the air. "Spousal consent for prototype integration. She authorized the replacement. Legally, you don't exist anymore. Your identity has been transferred to me." My world shattered. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a corporate plot. It was the woman I loved, selling my life for credits. "Elena," I said. "I didn't think they'd try to kill you," she cried. "They promised." "Corporations lie, Elena," Cade said smoothly. "And so do you. That's why you were such a good test subject." He looked at me, his eyes glowing that lethal violet again. "Now," Cade said, drawing his weapon, a heavy plasma cannon that hummed with terrifying power. "The test is over. The data collection is complete. There is only one variable left to resolve. And what's that? I asked, my grip tightening on my pistol, though I knew it was useless. There can't be two of us, Cade said. It confuses the payroll algorithm. He raised the cannon. I looked at Elena. She was cowering in the corner. I looked at the city outside, the city I had bled for. And I looked at the machine wearing my face. Despair washed over me. It was a heavy, suffocating wave. I was old. I was broken. My wife had sold me. My department was hunting me. Maybe Cade was right. Maybe I was obsolete. Maybe it was easier to just let go. I lowered my gun. Smart choice, Cade said, his finger tightening on the trigger. But as I looked down, my eyes caught the reflection in the polished black floor. I saw myself, battered, bloody, gray-haired. And I saw the ARIS overlay still scrolling. Target: Cade Thorne. Integration level: 98%. Vulnerability: detected. Thermal exhaust port. Location: base of neck. The EMP hadn't killed him, but it had damaged his cooling system. He was running hot. He was arrogant. And he was standing right in front of the window. I didn't raise my gun. I triggered the disruptor charge Jax had given me, not throwing it, but detonating it in my own pocket. The blast was small, contained, but it blew the power relays in the room. The lights died. The magnetic locks on the window disengaged. And for a split second, Cade's advanced optics had to recalibrate to the sudden darkness. In that second, I didn't shoot him. I tackled him. I slammed into him with every ounce of strength I had left, driving my shoulder into his chest. We hit the glass. The reinforced pane, weakened by the power outage, shattered. We fell, 50 stories, into the rain and the night. The wind roared in my ears. I saw Elena screaming at the broken window, shrinking away as we plummeted. I saw Cade's face, twisted in shock, his hands clawing at me. "You're insane!" he shrieked, his voice distorting. "I'm human!" I screamed back. We tumbled through the air, wrestling as the ground rushed up to meet us. I jammed my thumb into the soft spot at the base of his neck, digging for the thermal vent. He punched me in the face, shattering my nose, but I didn't let go. We smashed through a holographic billboard, a giant smiling face advertising a brighter tomorrow, and the impact tore us apart. I fired my grappling line, the emergency descender built into every officer's belt. The hook shot out, catching on a gargoyle of a lower building. The line snapped taut, wrenching my arm nearly out of its socket, swinging me hard into the stone wall. Cade didn't have a grapple. He tried to activate his thrusters, but the damage to his cooling system caused a misfire. One jet flared, sending him into a chaotic spin. He fell, down, down, down into the abyss of the street level. I watched him go, a violet spark vanishing into the fog. I hung there, dangling against the side of a skyscraper, blood dripping from my nose into the void. I was alive, but as I pulled myself up onto a ledge, gasping for air, my ARIS system pinged one last notification. Incoming transmission. Source: unknown. "You think you won?" A voice rasped in my ear. It wasn't Cade. It was a deeper, colder voice. "You just destroyed a prototype, Lieutenant. We have a factory full of them. And we still have your wife." The line went dead. I sat on the ledge looking out at the hostile city. I had nothing left. No badge, no wife, no home. But I had a name, Syntech, and I had a target. I reached into my boot and pulled out a burner phone Jax had slipped me. I dialed the only number stored in it. "Jax," I said when he picked up. "I'm not dead." "Good," Jax said, "because I just found out where the factory is." "Tell me," I said, wiping the blood from my eyes. "I'm going to burn it to the ground." The rain had stopped, but the city was still crying. That's what it looked like from the passenger seat of Jax's heavy-lift transport drone as we skimmed over the rooftops of Sector 4. The condensation on the neon signs dripped like tears, pooling in the gutters of a world that had forgotten how to feel. "We're approaching the perimeter," Jax's voice crackled over the comms. He was piloting from the garage, his consciousness uploaded to the drone's navigation core. "Syntech's main foundry. It's a fortress, Marcus. Automated turrets, thermal grids, and God knows what else. You sure about this?" I checked the load on the mag-rail shotgun I'd salvaged from Jax's armory. It was an illegal modification, heavy and ugly, capable of punching a hole through a tank. I'm not turning back, Jax. Is the broadcast uplink ready? Ready and waiting, Jax replied. The second you breach the central server room, I'll patch your optical feed directly to the public net. Every screen in Neo Chicago, from the billboards in Times Square to the data pads in the slums, will see what you see. If we're going down, we're taking their stock price with us. Good. The drone hovered over a massive, windowless monolith of black glass and steel on the edge of the dead zone. This was the womb where the nightmares were born. Dropping you in 3, 2, 1. The bay doors opened. I didn't rappel, I jumped. The gravity dampeners in my boots whined as I hit the roof, absorbing the impact that should have shattered my remaining good bones. I was moving on painkillers and pure distilled rage. I sprinted toward the ventilation stacks. My ARIS system, battered but functional, highlighted the heat signatures of the perimeter guards. They were efficient, precise, robotic. Target: SentryBot Alpha. Vulnerability: optical sensor array. I didn't bother with stealth. I raised the shotgun and fired. The slug, a superheated tungsten rod, tore through the air with a shriek, obliterating the first bot before it could even swivel its head. The alarm began to wail, a mournful electronic siren that echoed across the rooftop. Door breached, I grunted, kicking the maintenance hatch off its hinges. I'm in. The inside of the foundry was terrifyingly sterile. It was white, blindingly, clinically white. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. I moved through the catwalks, looking down at the production floor. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Below me, stretching for what looked like miles, were rows of transparent stasis tanks. Inside each one, suspended in amber fluid, was a body. But they weren't just random bodies. I saw the mayor. I saw the chief of police. I saw high-ranking judges. And in the section marked Law Enforcement, Lieutenant Class, I saw me. Hundreds of me. Some were fully formed, floating with their eyes closed, looking peaceful. Others were half-finished, muscle and wire exposed, grotesque parodies of human biology. Jax, I whispered, my voice trembling. Are you seeing this? I'm seeing it, Jax said, his voice grim. Holy hell, Marcus. It's a coup. They aren't just replacing bad cops. They're replacing the entire infrastructure of the city. A government owned, operated, and maintained by Syntech. Not on my watch, I growled. I slid down a ladder to the main floor, my boots squeaking on the pristine tile. I needed to get to the central control node at the far end of the hall. Halt! The voice boomed from the overhead speakers. A massive holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. It was a face I recognized from the financial news feeds, Director Silas Vance. No relation. Just a coincidence of naming that felt like a cruel joke. He was the CEO of Syntech. Lieutenant Vance, the director's voice was smooth, cultured. You represent a significant sunk cost. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to clean up a mess like this? I'm about to make it a lot more expensive, I shouted, aiming my shotgun at the projector. Please, Silas laughed. You're an organic relic. You're fighting the tide. Doors hissed open along the walls. A squad of security personnel marched out. But they weren't droids. They were me. 5 copies of Marcus Vance. Younger, faster, stronger. They wore the uniform I had worn 20 years ago. They moved with the synchronized perfection of a dance troupe. Kill him, Silas commanded. The clones raised their weapons. I dove behind a forklift as the air filled with plasma fire. The heat seared the back of my neck. I was pinned. Jax! I yelled into the comms. I could use a miracle here. Working on it! Jax shouted back. I'm trying to hack their IFF transponders, but their encryption is military grade. You gotta buy me time. I popped up and fired a blind shot. One of the clones took the hit in the shoulder. He didn't scream. He just stumbled, recalibrated, and kept firing. It was like fighting my own ghost. They have your memories, Marcus, Jax said. Use that. They know your tactics, but they also know your doubts, my doubts. I stopped firing. I crouched behind the steel plating of the forklift, breathing hard. The clones were advancing. I could hear my boots. Hey, I shouted. Sector 12, the warehouse, November 14th, 2042. The firing stopped instantly. That was the date I had killed a kid. It was an accident, a crossfire during a drug bust. The kid had a toy gun. I had nightmares about it every single night for 8 years. It was the darkest, deepest scar on my soul. A scar that these clones, if they truly had my mind, would share. "You see his face, don't you?" I screamed, stepping out from cover, my hands raised but holding the shotgun. "You see the red shirt? You see the way he fell?" The 5 clones froze. Their perfect, stoic faces twitched. The programming was fighting the memory. The tactical algorithm was warring with the traumatic imprint. "He didn't have a weapon," one of the clones whispered. "It was my voice from the past." "It was a mistake," another clone said, his hand shaking. "We are supposed to protect," a third said, lowering his rifle. "Override!" Silas's voice shrieked from the speakers. "Target is hostile. Execute! Execute!" The clones grabbed their heads, screaming in unison as the inhibitor chips fried their neural pathways, trying to force compliance. "They're confused," Jax yelled. "The emotional feedback loop is crashing their logic centers. Marcus, run! Get to the server room!" I didn't wait. I sprinted past my writhing doppelgangers, their screams of shared trauma echoing in the vast hall. I hit the door to the server room and blew the lock with my last shotgun shell. I burst inside. It was a circular room, walls lined with blinking drive cores. In the center, standing next to a physical console, was Director Silas. He was holding a pistol, and holding onto his arm, looking pale and terrified, was Elena. "Stop right there, Marcus!" Silas yelled, pressing the gun to Elena's temple. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Let her go," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She's my insurance policy," Silas sneered. "And she's my property. Just like everything else in this city is about to be." I looked at Elena. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, swollen. "Marcus," she whimpered. "Please." I didn't know it would go this far. I activated the ARIS overlay one last time. Target, Elena Vance. Status, hostage. Deception, 0%. Regret, 99%. "Jax," I whispered. "Is the feed live?" "We are live, Marcus," Jax said. "The whole city is watching. They see him. They see the gun. They see the tanks." Silas didn't know. He thought this was a private execution. "You can't win, Silas," I said, stepping closer. "The people know. You're trying to replace humanity with compliant hardware. It's over." "The people are sheep," Silas spat. "They want safety. They want order. I give them that." "And what do you give them?" "Chaos, emotions, mistakes." "I give them the truth," I said. Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. "Say goodbye to your wife, Lieutenant." I didn't lunge for him. I didn't shoot. I looked at Elena. "Duck," I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order from a husband who knew his wife's reflexes. Elena didn't think. She dropped. She collapsed her knees and fell to the floor, a move we had practiced 1,000 times in self-defense classes years ago. Silas was left holding air. In that split second of confusion, I threw my heavy trench coat at him. It was a distraction, a fluttering shadow. He fired blindly, the plasma bolt burning a hole in the fabric. I tackled him. We hit the console. The gun skittered across the floor. Silas was a businessman, not a fighter. I drove my fist into his jaw, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone. He crumbled instantly. I stood up panting, standing over him. I looked at the console. The master reset command was blinking on the screen. "Marcus," Elena whispered. She was still on the floor, looking up at me. She reached out a hand. "You saved me. I knew you would. We can fix this. We can go back." I looked at her hand. Then I looked at her face. I remembered the warehouse. I remembered the red dress. I remembered the signature on the consent form. "No, Elena," I said softly. "We can't." "What?" She looked stricken. "I saved you because that's my job," I said. "I'm a cop. I protect civilians, even the ones who sell me out." I turned back to the console. "Marcus, please," she cried, scrambling to her feet. "I love you." "System," I said aloud. "Voice authentication, Marcus Vance. Execute command, factory purge. Authorization, override. Access denied," the computer chirped. Authorization requires 2 senior officers. I froze. Then, the door behind me opened. I spun around, expecting security. It was one of the clones, the one with the bullet wound in his shoulder. He was limping, his face pale, blood leaking from his nose where the inhibitor chip had tried to kill him. He looked at me with eyes that were mirrors of my own pain. He walked up to the console. He looked at me and gave a small, sad nod. Voice authentication, the clone rasped, his voice identical to mine. Lieutenant Marcus Vance. Copy 4. The computer processed. Authorization accepted. Purge sequence initiated. Sirens began to blare. Red lights flashed. The cooling systems on the tanks shut down. The fluid began to drain. The unfinished bodies began to dissolve as the fail-safes kicked in. Get out, I told the clone. You don't have to die here. I have nowhere to go, he said, staring at the screen. I'm not real. You made a choice, I said. That makes you real enough. I grabbed Elena by the arm, not gently, but firmly. We're leaving. We ran past the dissolving tanks, past the chaos of the waking clones, past the unconscious body of Silas Vance. We burst out onto the roof just as Jax's drone swooped down to pick us up. As we lifted off, the foundry below began to implode. A series of deep structural explosions rocked the foundation. The black monolith crumbled inward, a cloud of white dust and dark secrets rising into the night sky. 6 hours later, I sat on the hood of a car in the precinct parking lot. The rain had started again. The giant screens on the sides of the skyscrapers were no longer playing ads. They were playing the footage. My footage. The city was in an uproar. Crowds were gathering in the streets, chanting. The National Guard had been called in to secure Syntec facilities. Silas Vance had been arrested, dragged out of the rubble by a squad of human officers. I held a cup of coffee in my hand. It was real coffee. Black. Bitter. Elena was sitting in the back of a squad car 10 feet away. She wasn't in cuffs, but she wasn't free. She was giving a statement to Internal Affairs. She kept looking over at me through the window. I didn't look back. You're a hero, a voice said. I looked up. It was Jax. He was standing there, wiping grease off his hands. I'm unemployed, I said. The mayor, the real one, not the soup mix version, wants to give you a medal, reinstatement, a promotion. Captain Vance. I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. I'm done, Jax, I said. I'm done with the badge. I'm done with the system. I tapped my temple. And I'm done with this. You want me to take it out? Jax asked. The ARIS link? Yeah, I said. I want it gone. I want to trust my gut again. Even if it's wrong. Especially if it's wrong. It'll hurt, Jax warned. I can handle pain, I said. I've had a lot of practice lately. I stood up and tossed the coffee cup into a recycling bin. I looked at the city one last time. It was still gray, still wet, still dangerous. But for the first time in 20 years, it felt honest. I walked toward Jax's van. I didn't look at the squad car where my ex-wife sat. I didn't look at the smoking ruins of the factory on the horizon. I just walked. One foot in front of the other. No overlays, no data streams, no percentage probabilities. Just Marcus Vance, living in the moment, and that was enough.